All right, we're looking for the best strategy to win fantasy football week 9 and set your team up for success as you head into the fantasy playoffs and take down that fantasy championship. Now, I am only in expert leagues, and this is what the experts are doing. First and foremost, mitigating the injuries at the wide receiver position. Everyone's fantasy team has suffered from wide receiver injuries. We've lost Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Brandon Ayuk, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, T. Higgins, Stephon Diggs, DK Metcalf, Brian Thomas, Christian Kirk, and now even Calvin Ridley, very usable, and got hurt when they were down 30. Also, we're seeing tight ends step up and fill that void. Every time an NFL team loses a playmaker, it creates a void and allows others to step up. Right now, we're seeing tight ends step up and start to command targets that the alpha receivers were commanding earlier in the year. And we're seeing rookies making a big impact. Look at Ladd McConkey. 6 catches, 112 yards, and 2 touchdowns. We had Marvin Harrison show up again last week. We had Keon Coleman erupt for close to 20 fantasy points. So as everyone scrambles to find options to play at the wide receiver position, at the flex position, the best strategy to win fantasy football week 9 is to find the underdogs in shootouts on the schedule. These teams will be forced into passing situations frequently, and ideally, you're targeting receivers and tight ends that are stepping into target voids as well. So they'll be facing garbage time, and their quarterbacks will have no choice but to heave the ball up to them. Now, who are these players? We start with Miami. They are a touchdown dog at Buffalo. Of course, everyone is going to be playing Tyreek Hill with Tua back under center, but don't forget about Jalen Waddle and Jonnu Smith. Both dudded out last week. Both are high-end playmakers. These are two of the most versatile players at their respective positions. Jalen Waddle can win in every quadrant of the football field. He has great speed. He has great route running. He has great hands. He has great everything. He's just been unlucky this year. Jonnu Smith is a big, athletic, versatile tight end. He can play H-back. He can play in line. I am starting Waddle in spite of his struggles this year, and I am considering streaming Jonnu Smith even into a flex position in deeper leagues where you just don't have many options. Then you look at Las Vegas, 47-point total, 7.5-point dogs. Who are the top 2 receivers there? Of course, you're playing Brock Bowers, but also Jacoby Myers. Myers had 7 targets, 17 fantasy points, great rapport with Gardner Minshew. And now look at Green Bay. They're at home facing a juggernaut in the Detroit Lions. Malik Willis going to be under center. That's okay if you're either the starting tight end, a two-way tight end like Tucker Kraft, play him, even with Malik Willis, and the best option, the number 1. If you poll their players, if you look at the advanced metrics, the best receiver on that team is Jaden Reed. He's the one I trust. He's the one I'm playing. You want to chase the points that are on the board in these shootouts, especially when teams are projected to be in comeback mode. This is the perfect game environment for Jaden Reed to get there, even with Malik Willis. Now, quarterbacks have been relatively healthy this year, but if you have, say, Brock Purdy, and you're looking at a bye week, Malik Willis is a great plug-and-play streaming option. That mobility comes in particularly handy in comeback mode. Lions go into a prevent defense in the 4th quarter, and Malik Willis is running for first downs and getting out of bounds. You'll see it happening, and he might run a touchdown in. In deep leagues, Malik Willis is a great streaming option, and in Superflex, 2 QB leagues, start him with confidence. Now look at Jacksonville, just lost Brian Thomas for a few weeks, lost Christian Kirk to a broken clavicle. Who's going to step up? The de facto number 1 wide receiver now in Jacksonville is Parker Washington. He's just a guy, but he's a guy that can get targets. Jawan Jennings earlier in the year is just a guy and scored 3 touchdowns in a similar role to Parker Washington. So in deeper leagues, starting Parker Washington, knowing he's going to be top of the target totem pole, makes a lot of sense. But the number 1 guy that Trevor Lawrence is going to be targeting this week is Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram is going to smash. He is a DFS play. He's a pick'em prop play. He's an everything play this week. Just based on the law of the conservation of targets, you know that Evan Ingram is going to get 10-plus targets, and he will get there in fantasy football in week 9. And then the expert fantasy footballers, what do? They leverage overreactions. Oh, Jalen McMillan, he's no Cade Otton. Scored less than 10 fantasy points week 8, dropping him. Oh, I took a chance on Trey Palmer in deep leagues with those 4-3-3 wheels. Dud it out, drop him. Except this is the week to play your Buccaneers wide receivers that are going on the road to face the Chiefs. The Chiefs are 9-point favorites. Baker Mayfield is going to be in YOLO mode. He's going to be heaving it deep to Trey Palmer. He's going to be looking for Jalen McMillan running that Chris Godwin route tree. One of my favorite tactics for winning in fantasy football, letting your opponents overbid on wide receivers especially, and then watch those wide receivers dud out. They get dropped, and then you bid zero and scoop those players up for free. Now, we mentioned earlier, rookies are going to step up this week. Look at Xavier Legette. It's a 45-point total. The Panthers are 7-point dogs. He was the most heavily targeted wide receiver in Week 8, and he's the most talented. He's a big, athletic, first-round pick. And I know the 49ers have a bye. Ricky Pearsall just had the 4 targets. Didn't wow anyone with his fantasy production. But I love that he's the locked-in third option for Brock Purdy. Love that they're giving him carries, and he ran the ball for 40 yards. Your league mates will also be considering dropping Ricky Pearsall because they're heading into a bye, because they're dealing with injuries, their rosters are getting squeezed. Ricky Pearsall is going to hit a number of waiver wires, and that's a perfect player to pick up for free because Brandon Ayuk is not coming back this year. Nico Collins is coming back. Brandon Ayuk is not. But you pick players like Xavier Legette and Ricky Pearsall up now. These are late first, early second round draft picks with athleticism and real upside. But the number one rookie I'm targeting is Rome Odunze. I'm trying to acquire him in trade, in Dynasty, in seasonal leagues. He was the leading receiver again in a game where Caleb Williams struggled. Caleb Williams is going to struggle. He's not the rookie of the year. That's Jaden Daniels. Caleb Williams will be up and down, but there have been up games. And in those up games, Caleb Williams was looking for Rome Odunze. He went over 100 yards, smashed against the Colts. More spike weeks are coming for Rome Odunze. Get him now before he has one of these 120 yards and 2 touchdown performances, and then everyone realizes, oh, this guy's better than Marvin Harrison. He's right there with Malik Neighbors. Whoops. Should have held on to him. Too bad, now he's mine. I also have Roschon Johnson stashed. I say Roschon Johnson? Yeah, Roschon Johnson. He's getting carries inside the 5. The team already trusts him more than they trust DeAndre Swift in the green zone. DeAndre Swift has been top of the league in expected fantasy points per game the last month. If he sustains an injury, and DeAndre Swift is hurt every year, most running backs sustain some injury throughout the course of a year. It just so happens that this is an outlier season in the NFL and that more receivers are missing time than starting running backs. That trend will likely reverse in the second half, and you're going to want to have the highest upside running back stashed on your bench, and that guy is Roschon Johnson because if Swift goes down, Roschon becomes a bell cow. But if I'm ranking my preferred handcuffs, number 1 is Ray Davis because he would be the bell cow if James Cook misses time for a team that is an absolute offensive juggernaut. Blake Corum would be the workhorse if and when Kyren Williams gets hurt. And then it will be him scoring the 20 fantasy points per game. He's my number 2 must-stash running back. Number 3 is Kamani Vidal. Kamani Vidal has been exceeding everyone's expectations in the receiving game, and he's an explosive runner between the tackles. J.K. Dobbins, he's been productive, but he's a ticking time bomb. My number 4 stash is Roschon Johnson for all the reasons I outlined earlier. My number 5 stash, Trey Benson. He's getting acclimated, more comfortable, able to translate that raw speed into breakaway runs on the football field. He would be the undisputed primary back should James Conner miss time. Same with Braylon Allen. Now, Jalen Wright would not necessarily be the primary back should Mostert miss time or Achane miss time, but that running game is so efficient, and Jalen Wright is such a perfect fit and such an explosive playmaker that even getting just 10 touches a game, Jalen Wright will be someone you're flexing week in, week out, so that's why he's my number 7 must-stash running back. Then it's Ty Chandler. Then it's Carson Steele. Carson Steele is the only other running back other than Kareem Hunt getting carries in Kansas City. Kansas City is mauling their opponents on both sides of the football. Carson Steele personifies mauling, and he would be reinstalled as the primary back should Kareem Hunt get relegated, get hurt. Kareem Hunt's been one of the least efficient runners in the league. It's clear Kansas City is just trying to squeeze everything they can out of him in the middle part of the season. So don't be surprised if it's Carson Steele once we get to the fantasy playoffs. Then it's Dameon Pierce. Dameon Pierce is interesting. Joe Mixon's putting up huge fantasy points. A lot of those would go to Dameon Pierce if Joe Mixon goes down again. Last time Joe Mixon got hurt, Dameon Pierce was also hurt. The problem is he'd lose touches, especially in the passing game, to Dare Ogunbowale. That's part of the reason why I don't have Kenneth Gainwell higher. Kenny Gainwell is a fun player, but he would not assume a primary back workhorse role if Saquon Barkley goes down. He would share that with Will Shipley. So that's the best strategy to win fantasy football week 9. Plug and play receivers and tight ends in games where their teams are going to be in comeback mode and have to score a lot of points. Pick up some rookie receivers that are ready to break out, especially Rome Odunze, but keep those running backs with maximum upside stashed on your bench because those would be the players that you insert in the fantasy playoffs and win all the money.